My mom ignored my 6-year-old daughter's birthday party and 4 days later had the audacity to demand $3,200 for my sister's graduation. I stared at the text message glowing on my phone screen, reading it for what felt like the 100th time. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the device onto my kitchen counter. The message was from my mother, and it was as cold and transactional as a business email from a stranger. Nicole, we need $3,200 for Ashley's graduation celebration. Your father and I are covering $2,000. You should send the rest by Wednesday. Don't make this difficult. No greeting, no warmth, just a demand wrapped in the thinnest veneer of family obligation. What made my blood boil wasn't just the amount or the entitled tone, it was the timing. This message arrived exactly 4 days after my mother had completely ignored my daughter Emma's 6th birthday party. The party I'd spent weeks planning, the party Emma had been talking about nonstop for an entire month. My daughter Emma is the light of my entire world, and watching her little face fall as she kept checking the window for her grandmother that Saturday afternoon nearly destroyed me. I'm 31 years old, working as a nurse practitioner at a community health clinic in Portland, Oregon, and I've been raising Emma on my own since her father walked out when she was barely 2 months old. That abandonment hurt, but honestly, it was probably better than raising a child with someone who didn't want to be there. What hurt infinitely more was watching my own mother treat my precious girl like she was invisible, like her birthday didn't matter. I had sent the invitation 6 weeks early, called multiple times to confirm, even offered to pick my mother up if she needed a ride. She lived only 15 minutes away, so distance wasn't an issue, and she'd actually promised, that she'd be there. Emma kept asking when Grandma would arrive because she desperately wanted to show her the new bicycle I'd saved for months to buy. The party was supposed to start at 2 in the afternoon on that sunny Saturday. I had transformed our backyard into a magical fairy garden theme because Emma was obsessed with everything sparkly and magical. I'd spent nearly $400 on decorations, hired a face painter, ordered a custom 3-tier cake shaped like a castle. The night before, I'd stayed up past midnight hanging twinkling lights from every tree branch and setting up craft stations. Emma woke up that morning practically vibrating with excitement, putting on her special birthday dress at 10 even though guests wouldn't arrive for 4 more hours. By 3 o'clock, all of Emma's school friends had arrived and were running around the yard with painted faces and fairy wings. The bounce house I'd rented was full of shrieking, happy children, but my daughter kept drifting to the front window. She pressed her small hands against the glass, searching the street for my mother's silver sedan with desperate hope in her eyes. Every single time a car passed our house, I watched Emma's face light up, only to crumble when it wasn't her grandmother. I must have called my mother's phone 8 times during those first 2 hours, and every call went straight to voicemail. My sister Ashley, who's 25 and still lives with our parents, finally sent me a brief text around 4:30. It said simply, "Mom's busy today, can't make it," with no real explanation, no apology directed at Emma. No acknowledgement that this might devastate a 6-year-old child who'd been counting down the days to see her grandmother. I somehow managed to keep smiling throughout the entire party, singing happy birthday with enthusiasm I didn't feel. When the last guest finally left around 6 in the evening and I was cleaning up discarded paper plates, Emma came up to me with tears streaming down her cheeks. Her voice was so tiny and broken when she asked, "Mommy, did I do something bad? Is that why Grandma didn't come to my party?" I pulled her into my arms and held her while she cried, feeling like the worst mother in the world for not protecting her. I told her over and over that she hadn't done anything wrong, that she was perfect and loved and special. But I could see in her eyes that she didn't quite believe me, and that look haunted me for days afterward. Now, sitting in my kitchen 4 days later, staring at my mother's demand for $3,200, something inside me snapped. This wasn't the first time my mother had prioritized Ashley over Emma and me. Not even close. Last year, she'd also skipped Emma's 5th birthday party, claiming she had a terrible migraine that mysteriously disappeared the same evening. 2 weeks after that missed party, my mother had called asking me to contribute $400 toward Ashley's car insurance. Like an absolute fool, I had paid it because that's what family does, according to my mother's twisted logic. The year before that, Mom had actually shown up to Emma's 4th birthday, but left after exactly 25 minutes. Ashley had called wanting to go shopping at some sale, and Mom just abandoned the party without even watching Emma blow out her candles. I'd spent years trying to be the good daughter, the reliable one who never complained, the one who always showed up and paid up. Where had it gotten me? Sitting alone at my kitchen table while my daughter asked if she'd done something wrong. I looked at my phone again, rereading that cold, demanding message, and felt something harden in my chest like steel forming. I had spent my entire adult life trying to earn love that should have been freely given to both me and my daughter. I was exhausted from watching Emma's face fall every single time my mother chose not to show up for her. Exhausted from being the designated family doormat who was expected to hand over money whenever asked, but never received support in return. Something my therapist had told me months ago suddenly echoed in my mind with perfect clarity. You can't control how other people treat you, Nicole, but you can absolutely control how you respond to that treatment. I opened my banking app and stared at the screen for a long moment, my finger hovering over the transfer button. My savings account showed $3,800, money I'd been carefully building for Emma's future and emergencies. $3,200 would wipe out nearly all of it for a party celebrating my sister, the same sister whose text message couldn't even apologize to my daughter. The same family who treated Emma like she was an afterthought, a footnote in their lives that didn't deserve real attention or love. I typed in the amount, but instead of $3,200, I entered $5. In the memo line, I wrote simply, "Congratulations, Ashley," and hit send before I could second-guess myself or chicken out. The confirmation screen glowed on my phone, payment sent, $5, and my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I had never defied my mother like this in my entire 31 years of life, never stood up for myself this way. Growing up, she had ruled our household with a specific kind of quiet disappointment that could crush your spirit without raising her voice. My mother didn't yell often, but her cold silence and disapproving looks could make you feel worthless for days. My father mostly went along with whatever she decided, never stepping in to defend me when I needed him. I grew up in a house where Ashley could do absolutely no wrong, where she was the golden child who needed protecting and supporting. I was the responsible older daughter who didn't need attention because I could supposedly handle everything myself. When I was 14 and Ashley was 8, I was the one making sure she had her homework done and her lunch packed every morning. When I got pregnant with Emma at 25, my parents' reaction was predictable and soul-crushing. Disappointment wrapped in hollow, "we'll support you" statements that never materialized into actual help or presence. They didn't come to any of my prenatal appointments, didn't help me set up the nursery, didn't show real interest. When I went into labor 3 weeks early and called my mother in a panic, she said she couldn't come to the hospital. She had promised to take Ashley to some concert and couldn't break that commitment, even though I was terrified and alone. I had Emma with only a kind nurse named Patricia holding my hand through the worst contractions and moments of fear. No family, no one who was supposed to love me unconditionally, just me and a stranger who showed more compassion in 4 hours. After Emma was born, things improved slightly on the surface. My parents would visit occasionally and bring small gifts. They liked showing pictures of their granddaughter to their friends and coworkers, using Emma as a prop for their image. But the deeper issues remained like cracks in a foundation, every family gathering structured around what Ashley needed and wanted. Emma and I were always afterthoughts, expected to show up and smile but never really seen or valued. When Emma was 2 years old, my car completely broke down and left me stranded with a terrified toddler. I called my father because I didn't know what else to do, and the repair estimate came back at $900. He lectured me for 30 minutes about financial responsibility and poor planning before finally agreeing to lend me the money. Lend, not give. And he made sure I understood the difference and felt appropriately grateful for his conditional generosity. I paid him back every single penny within 7 months, even though it meant eating rice and beans for weeks. Even though it meant skipping meals sometimes so Emma could have enough, I paid it back in full. 3 years later, Ashley totaled her car driving while texting, and my father bought her a replacement vehicle outright for $14,000. Ashley never paid him back a single cent, and when I quietly asked my mother about the obvious double standard, she got defensive. "Ashley's going through a difficult transition period, Nicole. She needs our support right now," was her exact response, implying I apparently never did. Tell me in the comments, what would you do in this situation? Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? I had tried to talk to them about the favoritism once, about a year and a half ago, sitting them down for a serious conversation. I explained how their treatment hurt, how I felt invisible, how Emma deserved grandparents who actually showed up for her life. My father sat with his arms crossed and his face completely impassive, looking like I was wasting his valuable time. When I finished pouring my heart out, he said, "You've always been overly sensitive, Nicole. We treat both our daughters exactly the same." My mother nodded along enthusiastically, backing him up completely like she always did without question or independent thought. "You're imagining problems that don't exist, honey. We love you both equally," she said, gaslighting me with a smile on her face. After that conversation went absolutely nowhere, I stopped trying to fix our broken relationship or make them see reason. I maintained basic minimal contact, sent obligatory birthday cards, showed up to holiday dinners with Emma, but I stopped hoping. I stopped expecting they'd suddenly see us as worth their genuine time and energy. Stopped believing things would ever change. Still, some stupid hopeful part of me had genuinely believed they'd come to Emma's 6th birthday party this year. I had explicitly told my mother how much it meant to Emma, how she'd been talking about it constantly for weeks, how excited she was to show Grandma her new fairy dress, and the bicycle I'd worked overtime shifts to afford. They couldn't even bother to send a text until 4 hours after the party had started, and even that was dismissive. Now, sitting in my kitchen with that $5 payment confirmation glowing on my screen, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. My phone buzzed exactly 8 minutes after I sent the payment, and I knew without looking it was my mother. "Nicole, I don't see the full amount in my account. There must be some error with your bank. Please resend $3,200 immediately," the text read. I almost laughed out loud at her assumption that it had to be a mistake, that I couldn't possibly have intentionally sent $5. She couldn't even conceive of the possibility that I had sent exactly what I meant to send, that I was done playing by her rules. I didn't respond to her text, just set my phone face down on the counter and took a deep breath. Instead of engaging, I opened my contacts and scrolled to a number I'd saved 4 months ago, but never called. A family law attorney named Robert Chen, who had helped my coworker navigate a custody dispute with complicated family dynamics. I had consulted with him briefly back then, just exploring my options, understanding my rights as a single mother. Now I needed to actually use that information and protect myself from whatever was coming next, because I knew my mother wouldn't let this go. There was something else my parents didn't know, something I'd been quietly working on since Emma's 5th birthday disaster. The small house I lived in, the one I'd been making mortgage payments on for 4 years, wasn't just in my name anymore. When I'd first bought it at 27, right after Emma turned 2, my father had co-signed the mortgage supposedly to help me. At the time, I'd been grateful and naive, not realizing it was another form of control he could hold over my head. He kept a spare key and made comments about the house we helped you get whenever I pushed back on anything. 6 months ago, after that failed conversation where they dismissed all my concerns, I'd started researching my options with Robert's help. I learned I could refinance the house solely in my name if I could prove sufficient income and solid creditworthiness. It would cost money I didn't easily have available, but I'd been saving and cutting every possible expense for months. 3 months ago, I'd officially started the refinancing process in secret, telling absolutely no one, not even my closest friend. 2 months ago, the paperwork had gone through successfully, and the house became mine, solely and completely mine, with my father's name removed from everything. He just didn't know it yet, and I'd been waiting for the right moment to tell him, or maybe waiting to see if he'd give me a reason. He just had, and my mother's demanding text message was exactly the catalyst I needed to take the next step. I texted my best friend Rachel, asking if she was free that evening after I put Emma to bed, because I desperately needed to talk. She replied within 30 seconds, "Always here for you, come over around 8, wine is already breathing," and I felt grateful for real friendship. That evening, after I'd given Emma her bath and read her 2 bedtime stories and promised we'd go feed the ducks tomorrow, I drove to Rachel's apartment. She opened the door before I could even knock. 2 glasses of red wine already poured and waiting on her coffee table. "Okay," she said, pulling me inside and closing the door behind us. "You have that look on your face, what happened now?" I sat on her comfortable couch and told her absolutely everything. The text from my mother, the $5 payment, the house refinancing she didn't even know about. When I finished the entire story, Rachel was staring at me with wide eyes and her mouth slightly open in shock. "You already removed your father from the deed? When did this happen? How did I not know about this major life event?" she asked incredulously. I explained the timeline, how I'd been sitting on this information for 2 months, waiting to see if my parents would actually show up for Emma. They hadn't shown up, had proven once again that we didn't matter, and now my mother wanted thousands of dollars like nothing had happened. Rachel took a long drink of her wine and set the glass down carefully, processing everything I'd just told her. "What are you planning to do next? Because you know your mother is going to absolutely lose her mind when she realizes you're serious," she said. I explained that I was thinking about changing all the locks on my house, removing the last bit of access my father had. My father had that spare key and had used it before without permission, twice that I knew of for certain. Once he'd let himself in while Emma and I were at the grocery store because he wanted to check the water heater without asking. Another time he'd walked in unannounced, because he decided my lawn needed mowing and didn't bother calling first to see if I was home. It was a violation of my privacy and boundaries, but I hadn't fought it before because I was always trying to keep the peace. But there was no peace anymore. There was just me being used and taken for granted while my daughter suffered the consequences. "Change the locks tomorrow," Rachel said firmly. "I'll come with you to the hardware store. We'll make it happen. And honestly, Nicole, it's about time." I felt tears prick my eyes, grateful for her unconditional support and validation that I wasn't crazy or overreacting. We talked for another 2 hours, and she helped me think through all the practical steps I needed to take next. The next morning was Saturday, and Rachel picked me up at 9 o'clock sharp as promised, ready for action. Emma was at a sleepover with her best friend from school, a standing weekend arrangement that gave me time to handle difficult adult tasks. We went to the hardware store and bought new high-quality deadbolts for both my front and back doors, the kind that couldn't be easily picked. The man at the counter, an older gentleman with kind, weathered eyes, showed us exactly how to install them with basic tools. "Easy enough. Anyone can do this with a screwdriver in about 30 minutes, he said encouragingly. And I felt capable. Back at my house, I changed both locks myself, and the physical act of removing my father's access felt incredibly symbolic. Every turn of the screwdriver was a small revolution, a reclaiming of my space and my autonomy and my right to control my own home. When I finished and stood on my front porch looking at the new brass deadbolt, I felt something like pride wash over me. My phone had been buzzing repeatedly in my pocket the entire time, and when I finally checked it, I had 17 missed calls, 8 from my mother, 6 from my father, and 3 from Ashley, plus countless text messages filling my screen with notifications. My mother's texts had evolved from confused to angry to almost frantic over the course of 2 hours, escalating dramatically. "Nicole, what is this $5 nonsense? Call me immediately," had progressed to, "Your father is extremely upset. Fix this now," to finally, "If you don't call us back in 1 hour, we're coming to your house to discuss this face-to-face." I looked at the timestamp on that last message. It had been sent 43 minutes ago, which meant I potentially had 17 minutes. Rachel looked at the text over my shoulder and her eyes went wide with concern and a touch of anger on my behalf. "Do you want me to stay? I can be here when they show up, be a witness to whatever happens," she offered immediately. Part of me wanted to say yes, wanted the backup and support, but another part of me knew this confrontation needed to happen. "No, but stay close to your phone, and if I text you any kind of emergency code word, call the police," I said seriously. Rachel hugged me tight. "You've got this, Nicole. Remember that you're not doing anything wrong. You're setting healthy boundaries. They're the ones behaving badly." After she left, I sat in my quiet living room and let myself feel the fear crawling up my spine because I was absolutely terrified of what was coming. I was challenging my mother's authority for the first time in my entire life, standing up to parents who had controlled me through guilt and obligation. But I was also exhausted beyond measure, tired of trying to earn love that should have been freely given to me and my daughter. Tired of watching Emma's hopeful face crumble every time my family chose not to show up for important moments. Tired of being the designated family doormat who was expected to provide money and support, but received nothing in return except disappointment. At exactly 11 o'clock in the morning, I heard a car pull aggressively into my driveway, tires crunching on gravel. Through my front window, I watched my mother's silver sedan park, and both my parents got out with rigid, angry body language. My father's face was already red, and I could see him gesturing animatedly as they approached my front door together. My mother's expression was tight and pinched, the look she got when she was preparing to deliver a lecture about my many failings. Guys, tell me in the comments, who do you think is right in this story? Me or my parents? They reached my front porch, and I watched through the peephole as my father knocked sharply, 3 hard raps that sounded angry. I counted to 10 slowly, trying to steady my racing heartbeat and trembling hands before opening the door. I left the chain lock engaged, though, so only a narrow gap of space showed between us, a physical barrier matching the emotional one. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad," I said as calmly as I could manage, though my voice shook slightly with adrenaline. My father's eyes immediately went to the chain lock, then back to my face with an expression of disbelief and rage. "Take that chain off right now, Nicole. We need to talk to you about your completely unacceptable behavior," he demanded in that authoritative tone. I took a deep breath and said the word I'd never been able to say before, the word that felt like jumping off a cliff. "No," I said simply, and watched shock register on both their faces as if I'd slapped them, because I had never refused them anything. "What do you mean, no? We're your parents. "Open this door immediately," my mother said, her voice rising with indignation and anger. I kept my voice level and calm, even though inside I was shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. "This is my house, and I'm choosing not to invite you in right now. We can talk like this," I said firmly. My father's face turned an even deeper shade of red, almost purple, and I worried briefly about his blood pressure spiking dangerously. "Your house? The house I co-signed for? The house you couldn't have gotten without my help and financial backing?" he said, voice dripping with condescension. This was it. The moment I'd been simultaneously dreading and anticipating for 2 months. The moment of truth. "You co-signed the original mortgage 4 years ago, Dad, but I refinanced 2 months ago. Your name isn't on anything anymore," I said, watching realization dawn. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on my front porch as they processed. My father's mouth opened and closed several times like a fish gasping for air, completely unable to find words for once. My mother's face had gone pale, then flushed red, cycling through emotions rapidly as the implications sank in deep. "You refinanced without telling us? When? How? Why weren't we informed of this major decision?" My father finally managed to sputter out angrily. I straightened my spine and looked him directly in the eye, refusing to back down or apologize for protecting myself. "I wasn't legally required to inform you of anything, Dad. It's my property and my financial decision to make independently," I stated. My mother found her voice then, taking on that placating tone she always used when trying to manipulate me into compliance. "Nicole, honey, why would you do something like this? We've always been here to help you when you needed us," she said. The audacity of that statement, the blatant rewriting of history, made me actually laugh out loud, a bitter sound with no real humor in it. "Help me? When have you actually helped me, Mom? You didn't help when Emma was born and I was terrified and alone at the hospital," I said. "You didn't help when I was drowning in medical bills and you were buying Ashley a new car without question or hesitation. You didn't help 4 days ago when you completely ignored Emma's birthday party after promising her you'd be there after she talked about nothing else for weeks." My mother's eyes narrowed dangerously, and I could see her switching tactics from fake sweetness to aggressive defensiveness in real time. "We explained that I had a severe migraine, Nicole. I was in terrible pain and couldn't possibly attend a child's party," she said icily. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram, turning it to face them through the narrow door gap without saying a word. There on the screen was my mother's post from Emma's birthday, posted at 3:30 in the afternoon while the party was happening. A photo of her and Ashley at some trendy brunch restaurant downtown, both smiling broadly, caption reading, "Special Mother-Daughter Day with my baby girl." My mother's face went completely white as she stared at the evidence of her lie displayed on my phone screen. "I posted that earlier, before the migraine hit me," she stammered, scrambling for any explanation that might work. I scrolled to show the timestamp clearly visible on the post, 3:27 in the afternoon, more than an hour after Emma's party started. "You were having brunch with Ashley while my daughter cried, asking what she did wrong to make you not come," I said quietly, my voice breaking. My father stepped in then, trying to regain control of the situation, spiraling away from them rapidly and irreversibly. "This is about the money, isn't it? You're throwing an immature tantrum because we asked you to contribute to your sister's important milestone celebration," he accused. The way he framed it, like I was being petty and childish, made rage flood through my entire body, hot and sharp. "You didn't ask, Dad. You demanded $3,200 3 days after ghosting Emma's birthday without apology or explanation," I corrected him. "And I sent what I could actually afford to send, $5, which is $5 more than the emotional support you've given Emma in 6 years. My mother gasped, like I'd said something horrifically offensive, clutching her chest dramatically like she was having heart palpitations from shock. "How dare you speak to us this way after everything we've done for you, all the sacrifices we've made," she said, voice trembling with manufactured hurt. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest, a clarity I'd never experienced before in dealing with them and their manipulation. "What sacrifices, Mom? Name one actual sacrifice you've made for me or Emma in the last 6 years. Just one," I challenged. They both stood there silent, unable to produce a single example, proving my point better than any argument could. My father changed tactics again, going for intimidation and veiled threats like he always did when losing ground in a disagreement. "If you don't open this door right now and have a civil, respectful conversation, there will be serious consequences, Nicole," he said menacingly. I felt fear spike through me, but I also felt something stronger: anger and righteousness and the fierce protective instinct of a mother. What consequences? You can't threaten me with the house anymore because it's solely mine now. You have no power here, no leverage, no control, I said. My father's eyes flashed with something dangerous, and he pulled out his cell phone from his jacket pocket with deliberate slowness meant to intimidate. Last chance, Nicole. Open this door immediately, or I'm calling the police to report that you're keeping us from our granddaughter, he said coldly. I felt my stomach drop because I knew my father didn't make empty threats. He always followed through when challenged. Emma isn't even here. She's at a sleepover with her friend, and you're welcome to call whoever you want, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I watched in complete disbelief as my father actually dialed 911, really doing this, really calling the police on his own daughter. Yes, I need to report a concerning situation, he said into the phone, his voice taking on a worried, reasonable tone that made my skin crawl. My daughter is refusing to let us see our granddaughter. We're at her house now, and she won't even open the door to talk to us properly. He was twisting the entire situation, making it sound like I was unstable, like Emma was in danger, like they were concerned grandparents being unreasonably blocked. The manipulation was masterful, and I felt panic rising in my throat like bile, choking me with fear and rage combined. The address is 4216 Oakwood Drive in Portland, he continued, giving the dispatcher my address while staring at me through the door gap. Yes, we're very worried about the child's welfare and safety. We'll wait here for an officer to arrive, thank you so much. He hung up and looked at me with cold satisfaction, like he'd just won some kind of victory, played his trump card successfully. The police are on their way. Maybe they can talk some sense into you since you refuse to listen to your own parents, he said smugly. I closed the door and engaged the deadbolt, my hands shaking so violently I could barely turn the lock mechanism properly. My heart was racing at what felt like 200 beats per minute, and I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears. I had maybe 15 or 20 minutes before police arrived, and I needed to be prepared for whatever happened next. I went to my bedroom and grabbed the folder I'd prepared with Robert Chen's help, containing all my documentation and proof of everything. Inside were certified copies of my refinanced mortgage and property deed showing sole ownership, bank statements proving my income and financial stability, photos from Emma's birthday party with timestamps showing her waiting by the window, text message screenshots showing I'd invited my parents weeks in advance, screenshots of my mother's Instagram post proving she wasn't sick, but chose brunch with Ashley instead, everything organized and labeled clearly. I also had printouts of every financial demand my parents had made over the years, and proof I'd paid my father back fully. I opened a voice recording app on my phone and hit record, wanting documentation of every word said from this point forward if police were involved. Then I called Rachel, my hands still trembling as I held the phone to my ear and waited for her to answer. Rachel, my father called the police. They're coming here. He told them I'm keeping them from Emma even though she's not even home, I said rapidly. Rachel's response was immediate and fierce. I'm coming over right now. Don't talk to the police without me there. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Hang tight. True to her word, Rachel pulled into my driveway exactly 9 minutes later, and I watched her park and walk right past my parents still standing on my porch. They tried to speak to her, but she completely ignored them, and I opened my door to let her in quickly, then locked it again. Are you okay? Do you have everything ready? She asked, taking in my pale face and shaking hands with concern etched deeply in her features. I showed her the folder of documents and explained what my father had told the police dispatcher, how he'd twisted everything. That's parental alienation claims. It's serious. But you have proof of everything, Nicole. You're going to be fine, Rachel assured me, squeezing my hand. We sat together in my living room, and I tried to calm my racing heart by focusing on my breathing like my therapist had taught me. Outside, I could hear my parents talking to each other in low, urgent tones, probably coordinating their story for when officers arrived. Exactly 14 minutes after my father's call, I saw a police cruiser pull up to the curb in front of my house with lights on, but no siren. One officer got out, a woman in her late 30s with dark hair pulled back in a professional bun and a calm demeanor. She approached my porch where my parents immediately started talking to her, their voices animated and worried sounding from what I could hear through the walls. I watched through my front window as the officer listened, took notes, asked questions, her expression neutral and professional throughout. Then she approached my door and knocked firmly, but not aggressively, 3 professional raps clearly identifying herself as law enforcement. Ma'am, this is Officer Jennifer Morrison with Portland Police Department. Can you open the door, please? She called through the wood clearly. I took a deep breath, grabbed my folder of documents, and opened the door, this time removing the chain lock entirely to show cooperation. I stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind me so the officer could see I was being transparent and had nothing to hide. "Hello, Officer Morrison. I'm Nicole. Thank you for coming," I said, proud that my voice only shook slightly despite my terror. Officer Morrison looked at me carefully with assessing eyes that seemed to take in everything: my trembling hands, my defensive posture, the folder I clutched. "Your parents called with concerns about their granddaughter. They say you're refusing them access. Can you tell me your side of the situation?" she asked evenly. I took a steadying breath and began explaining the entire story from the beginning: how they'd missed Emma's birthday party 4 days ago without apology, how my mother had demanded money for my sister's party immediately after, how I'd set a boundary by sending $5 instead of thousands. "My daughter isn't even here right now, Officer Morrison. She's at a friend's house for a sleepover," I explained, pulling out my phone to show texts. I showed the officer the text exchange with Emma's friend's mother, confirming the sleepover pickup time and location, proving Emma was safe elsewhere. "I have documentation of everything if you'd like to see it," I offered, opening my folder to show the organized contents. Officer Morrison's expression shifted slightly as she looked at the prepared documents, professional interest replacing the neutral assessment she'd started with moments before. "This is quite thorough," she said, beginning to flip through pages carefully, reading my evidence with focused attention that gave me hope. My father stepped forward then, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he used when expecting to be obeyed without question. "Officer, our daughter has been acting erratically. We're concerned about her mental state and our granddaughter's well-being in her care," he said. I felt rage and hurt flood through me in equal measure. Him suggesting I was mentally unstable to a police officer was a new low. Officer Morrison held up one hand to stop my father from continuing, her attention still on the documents in front of her. She pulled out the screenshots of my mother's Instagram post and the text messages, comparing timestamps and reading captions carefully. "Ma'am, you told dispatch you were concerned because your daughter wouldn't let you see your granddaughter," she said to my mother directly. "But according to these text messages and this social media post, you missed the child's birthday party 4 days ago. Is that correct?" My mother's face flushed dark red, and she glanced at my father before answering, clearly trying to coordinate their response on the fly. "I was ill that day, I had a terrible migraine, and couldn't possibly attend a loud children's party," she said, repeating the lie. Officer Morrison held up my phone showing the Instagram post of my mother and Ashley at brunch during Emma's party time frame clearly. "This post suggests you were well enough to go out to eat during the party," she said neutrally, just stating facts without judgment or accusation. My mother stammered, trying to find an explanation that would work, but nothing came out except incoherent fragments of sentences going nowhere. Officer Morrison turned back to me with a different expression now, something closer to understanding and maybe even sympathy for my situation. "Ma'am, do you have any concerns about your safety or your daughter's safety regarding your parents?" she asked me directly, and I realized this question was significant. I thought about lying, about minimizing to keep the peace like I always had, but Rachel's presence behind me gave me courage to tell truth. "I'm concerned about their pattern of manipulation and emotional abuse, and I don't want my daughter growing up thinking she's not worthy of love," I said honestly. "They've repeatedly prioritized my younger sister over me and my daughter, broken promises to Emma, and now they're trying to use police to force their way back." Officer Morrison nodded slowly, making notes on her pad, then turned to address my parents directly with clear authority in her voice. "I don't see any evidence of parental alienation or child endangerment here," she said firmly, and I felt relief wash over me like cool water. "What I see is an adult woman setting boundaries with her family, which is her legal right to do on her own property," the officer continued professionally. My father's face went from red to almost purple, and he took a step toward the officer in what felt like an aggressive movement. "This is outrageous. She's our daughter. We have rights," he sputtered angrily, seeming to forget he was speaking to a police officer with actual authority here. Officer Morrison's expression hardened slightly, and she straightened to her full height, hand resting casually near her belt in a subtle show of authority. "Sir, you need to calm down immediately," she said in a tone that brooked no argument or discussion, pure command presence. "Your daughter is 31 years old. She owns this property outright based on these documents, and she has the right to refuse entry to anyone including family members." My mother tried a different approach then, tears suddenly springing to her eyes in a performance worthy of an Oscar nomination for Best Dramatic Actress. "But we just want to see our granddaughter. We love her so much, this is breaking our hearts," she said with a trembling voice. I couldn't stay silent at that blatant manipulation, not when the truth needed to be spoken clearly without emotional disguise clouding everything. You love her so much you couldn't come to her birthday party but could go to brunch with Ashley instead? I said, my voice harder than I'd ever heard it. You love her so much you never once asked if she was okay after missing her party, never apologized to her, just demanded money from me? My mother flinched like I'd physically struck her, and the tears dried up remarkably fast for someone supposedly heartbroken beyond measure. Officer Morrison looked between all of us, clearly having seen enough family drama to understand the dynamics at play here instantly and completely. I'm going to recommend that everyone takes some space and time to cool down, she said, in her professional mediator voice meant to de-escalate. Ma'am, she addressed me, do you want your parents to leave your property right now, yes or no? It was such a simple question, but it felt monumental. I looked at my parents, at their angry, entitled faces, at the complete lack of understanding or remorse showing anywhere in their expressions or body language. Yes, Officer Morrison, I want them to leave, please, I said clearly, and saying those words out loud felt like breaking chains I'd worn my entire life. Officer Morrison nodded and turned to my parents with clear authority radiating from her professional stance and tone of voice that meant business. You need to leave this property now. If you refuse, I can arrest you for trespassing. Do you understand? She said firmly, leaving no room for negotiation. My father looked like he wanted to argue, his jaw clenching and unclenching as he fought against the reality that he'd lost control of this situation. But even he wasn't foolish enough to argue with a police officer who'd just threatened arrest for trespassing on private property he no longer had any claim to. This isn't over, Nicole, he said coldly as he turned to leave, a parting threat meant to intimidate me back into submission and compliance. We'll be contacting our attorney about your completely unacceptable behavior and discussing our grandparent rights in court if necessary. My mother followed him, but she turned back at the last second, with one final attempt at manipulation and guilt-inducing emotional blackmail aimed at my heart. I hope you're proud of yourself for destroying this family, she said, voice dripping with manufactured pain and disappointment designed to wound. I watched them walk to their car, get in, and drive away, and I didn't feel proud exactly, but I did feel free for the first time. Officer Morrison stayed for another 10 minutes, asking me detailed questions about the situation and whether I felt safe and stable in my home environment. She took down all my information and gave me her card, telling me to call if my parents showed up again or made any threats toward me or Emma. You did the right thing setting boundaries, she said before leaving, and those words from an objective stranger meant more than she probably knew. Document everything, keep records of all communication, and don't let them guilt you into backing down on protecting yourself and your daughter. You're a good mother. After she left, I went back inside where Rachel was waiting, and I completely broke down, all the adrenaline and fear draining out. She held me while I cried. Not sad tears exactly, but release tears, relief tears. Tears that came from finally standing up for myself and Emma after years of accepting unacceptable treatment. The next few days were surprisingly quiet, almost eerily so after the dramatic confrontation and police involvement at my house. My parents didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up, just complete radio silence like I'd ceased to exist entirely in their world. Ashley sent me one text message that said, "Mom and Dad are really hurt, you've gone too far this time," but I didn't bother responding to her guilt trip. What was the point when she'd never understood or cared about my side of anything, never once stood up for Emma or questioned the favoritism? I picked Emma up from her sleepover Sunday afternoon, and she was full of stories about movies they'd watched and games they'd played with her friend. She didn't ask about my parents, didn't mention the missed birthday party, and I wondered if she was starting to accept that they simply weren't reliable people in her life. That thought broke my heart in new ways, but it also strengthened my resolve to protect her from further disappointment and emotional damage they could inflict. On Monday, I received an email from an attorney I didn't recognize, subject line reading regarding grandparent visitation rights, and my stomach dropped with fresh anxiety and dread flooding through me instantly. I opened it with trembling fingers, reading the formal legal language that essentially stated my parents were exploring their legal options for court-ordered visitation with Emma. The attorney's letter claimed I was unreasonably denying access and alienating the child from her loving grandparents who had always been present and supportive in her life. The blatant lies in formal legal language made me feel sick, but I also felt strangely calm because I had documentation proving everything they claimed was false. I immediately forwarded the email to Robert Chen, the family law attorney I'd consulted months ago about various legal protections I might need. He called me back within 2 hours, his voice reassuring and confident over the phone connection that felt like a lifeline in stormy waters. "Nicole, I've reviewed the letter, and honestly, they don't have much of a case here based on what you've told me previously and the documentation you have, he said. In Oregon, grandparents can petition for visitation rights, but they have to prove it's in the child's best interest, and courts generally favor parental authority and decision-making. They're going to have a very hard time proving that forcing visitation is beneficial when you have evidence they consistently failed to show up for important events. Robert continued, document everything moving forward, every missed occasion, every broken promise, every demand for money. All of it creates a pattern the court will recognize as harmful. I felt relief wash over me, knowing I had professional legal support and wasn't facing this battle alone without resources or knowledge. Robert agreed to formally represent me if my parents actually filed anything in court, and we discussed strategy for about 45 minutes until I felt prepared and protected. That evening, I sat Emma down for a conversation I'd been dreading but knew needed to happen for her emotional well-being and understanding. "Sweetheart, I want to talk to you about Grandma and Grandpa," I said gently, sitting beside her on the couch where she was coloring princess pictures. She looked up at me with those big, innocent brown eyes that held too much hurt for a 6-year-old to carry alone. "Are they coming to visit soon?" she asked with cautious hope that hadn't quite died yet despite everything that had happened to her. I chose my words carefully, wanting to be honest without completely destroying her image of them or making her feel responsible for adult problems. "I don't think they're going to be visiting for a while, baby," I said softly, brushing her curls back from her face with gentle fingers. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, and Grandma and Grandpa and I are having one right now, but I want you to know it has nothing to do with you." She was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the serious concentration children bring to understanding complex adult situations beyond their years. "Is it because they didn't come to my birthday?" she asked in a small voice that absolutely shattered my heart into a million pieces all over again. I pulled her onto my lap and held her close, breathing in her sweet shampoo smell and feeling her small heartbeat against my chest. "That's part of it, yes," I admitted honestly, because I didn't want to lie to her about something so important to her emotional development and understanding. But mostly it's because I realized that we deserve people in our lives who show up for us, who keep their promises, who make us feel loved and special. "Like you and Auntie Rachel?" she asked, and I smiled despite the tears forming in my eyes at her simple clarity and wisdom. "Exactly like me and Auntie Rachel, and your friends, and your teachers who care about you," I confirmed, squeezing her gently with reassurance and love. "We're going to be okay, baby, I promise. We have so many people who love us, and that's what really matters most in this life." She seemed to accept this explanation, nodding against my shoulder before asking if we could make cookies together, her 6-year-old attention span mercifully moving past heavy topics. Over the next month, life settled into a new normal without my parents' constant demands and emotional manipulation draining my energy and resources daily. I started seeing my therapist twice a week instead of once, working through the guilt and grief that came with setting necessary boundaries with toxic family members. Emma seemed lighter somehow, less anxious, no longer constantly asking when Grandma was coming or wondering what she'd done wrong to make them not love her enough. Rachel became even more present in our lives, stepping into an aunt role with genuine enthusiasm and commitment that my own sister had never shown. The legal threat from my parents never materialized into an actual court filing, which Robert said was common when people realized their case was weak. They'd tried to intimidate me back into compliance and submission, and when that failed, they simply disappeared from our lives entirely like we'd never existed. Ashley got her expensive graduation party, and I saw photos on social media showing my parents beaming with pride, surrounded by hundreds of guests at some fancy venue. I felt a twinge of sadness, not for missing it, but for the family I'd always wanted but never actually had except in wishful imagination. But mostly I felt free, liberated from the constant anxiety of trying to earn love that was always conditional and never quite enough no matter what I did. Emma and I started our own traditions. Sunday morning pancake breakfasts with silly faces made from chocolate chips and berries, weekly movie nights with blanket forts in the living room. We went to the zoo, the children's museum, the park, making memories with people who actually showed up and wanted to be there with us. I realized that family isn't always about blood relation. It's about who shows up, who stays, who loves you through the hard times without keeping score or demanding payment. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been the one who gives and gives while getting nothing back, I want you to know something important. You deserve better, your children deserve better, and setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's self-preservation and protection for those you love most. It's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family, especially if they're family who should know better and do better. Looking back now, 6 months after that confrontation on my front porch, I can say with complete certainty that sending that $5 payment was the best decision I ever made for myself and my daughter. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about finally saying enough is enough and meaning it with every fiber of my being. My parents taught me an important lesson, just not the one they intended to teach me through their years of manipulation and favoritism toward my sister. They taught me that I'm stronger than I ever knew, that I can stand up for myself and my child even when I'm terrified of the consequences that might follow. They taught me that some relationships are toxic no matter how much you want them to be different, and that protecting your peace is worth more than maintaining false harmony. Emma is thriving now, truly happy and secure in ways she never was when we were constantly chasing my parents' conditional approval and affection that never came freely. And me? I'm learning to love myself the way I always deserved to be loved, unconditionally, without needing to prove my worth through endless service and sacrifice. The house is mine, the locks are changed, and most importantly, my life is finally my own to live on my terms with people who genuinely care. That $5 payment bought me something priceless: my freedom, my dignity, and my daughter's emotional well-being and future happiness free from toxic patterns. So tell me in the comments, have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who didn't respect you or your children? How did you find the courage to finally say enough and mean it? I'd love to hear your stories because I know I'm not alone in this struggle, and maybe sharing our experiences can help someone else who's going through something similar right now. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own family dynamics or relationships that need boundaries, please share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. And if you want to hear more stories about standing up for yourself and finding strength you didn't know you had, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss future videos. Remember, you teach people how to treat you by what you accept, and you deserve to be treated with respect, love, and genuine care. Don't settle for less. Not from anyone, not even family. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, and for being part of this community where we support each other through the hard stuff. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.